Welcome, brothers and sisters, to my channel. And what I would like to cover in today's service, as well as my lecture series, I would like to pick up where I left off a couple of months ago regarding the Jacob series that I'm doing, which is on our ancestor Jacob, and a lot of the history behind the nation of Israel and us being the descendants of Jacob. Very important line. And what that really, the role that we play in this battle, this spiritual battle that's going on in the world today that we live in, and why it has all been codified and hidden, the role that the descendants of Jacob, that is the nation of Israel, the Israelites, what we, the role we play in stopping and putting an end to what is going on. And that is covered in Genesis 3:15 and why it's so important. And I told you I was going to pick up on the Jacob series to help us understand a lot of the history of our people being descendants of Jacob. So I'm going to cover Genesis 3:15, and it's also known in the world of Christianity, that verse, that section of that very important verse, one of the most important verses in the scriptures. It's also known in the world of Christianity, or in the Catholic Church especially, it's also called the Proto-Evangelium, and you can also Google that and look that up. But in a nutshell, what that means, Proto-Evangelium, is just another their term for that verse. So what it means is, I'm going to just read off, what it means here. When you Google it, says, strictly speaking, the Proto-Evangelium refers to the last part of Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, which is, what it means is, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now, why is that section really, really important? So let's find out. It refers to the bruising of the serpent's head and the bruising of the seed's heel. So in order to understand that, we really need to take a look at the actual meaning of that verse and break it down. So let's take a look at that verse. So if we go to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, I want to read that verse in its entirety. It says, again, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Now, there is another translation of that verse that was done in one of the early Aramaic. This is what I'm saying, the ancient language of our people, which was Aramaic. And these, the Edomites, these false people that are pretending to be us, did earlier translations of the Aramaic text from the ancient scrolls of our people. And there was a translation of the Aramaic there was an Aramaic translation into English back in around 1862, known as the Targumum, and the Targumum was they only translated, and this was from the original Aramaic scrolls, the Aramaic translation, the Aramaic writings. They only transferred the first 5 books, which is known as the Book of the Law. Okay, and that was translated around 1862 from the Aramaic. Okay, and this is really important because the earlier the translations, you get more clarity, but it's also understanding what are the translations to pull from. But just keep in mind, they still tampered and made a lot of changes, even in their translation of the Aramaic text, they made changes. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And no matter what translation, again, that you're reading, you're still reading the translation of your enemy, our enemies, and our enemies, and they made changes and alterations to the original writings of our people. Okay, but the earlier translations do bring more clarity to a lot of the verses. So I'm going to cover the Targumum, which is the translation of the first 5 books in Aramaic, from the Aramaic language, the ancient language of our people, that they did around the 1800s. This one was published in 1862, and they're I'm going to go to Genesis. Let me just go over here, and it's same. I'm going to read off the same verse 3:15 from this Aramaic translation that was translated into English from the Targum. So it says here. It's a little different because remember they were this is why they keep doing translations, because they were making changes along the way, so we couldn't understand the truth and figure a lot of this out. But it says, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between the seed of thy son, okay, he's referring to Satan or Lucifer's offspring, thy son, and the seed of her sons, and they use it in plural. Okay, and it shall be when the sons of the woman, okay, the sons of Eve, or Ada, which was probably her original name, the sons of the woman keep the commandments of the law. Okay, I want to repeat that. And the seed of her sons, I'm going to repeat it from the beginning, okay? And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between the seed of thy son and the seed of her sons. And it shall be when the sons of the woman keep the commandments of the law, they will be prepared to smite thee upon thy head. But when they forsake the commandments of the law, they will be ready to wound them in their heel. Okay? Nevertheless, for them there shall be a medicine, but for thee there will be no medicine. And they shall make a remedy for the heel in the days of King Mashiach. That essentially just means the anointed one. Now, that last section I'm going to cover another time, because that goes into a whole different territory, okay, when we start talking about that. But what is most important is the first half of that is what I just read. Because what you will understand in this translation, this is a much earlier translation, that it is very different, and it was one of the earlier translations, rather, this Targum of the Aramaic, and you notice there's additional text here that is not in the King James Version I just read you, because it says, and it shall be when the sons of the woman keep the commandments of the law, they will be prepared to smite thee upon the head. Now, it doesn't say that in the King James Version, right? This is additional text, okay, why this is so important. Additional verse that was completely removed. Okay, this was part of the Aramaic translation. But when they forsake the commandments of the law, thou will be ready to wound them in the heel. So this is coming down to understanding. So in other words, when the descendants of Eve, the woman, okay, who's known as Eve, when her offspring keeps the commandments of the law, they will be prepared to smite thee upon the head, which means, when you're talking about the head, he's talking about Satan's offspring, that they will be able to smite thee, in other words, crush the head. But when they forsake the commandments of the law, okay, when her offspring forsakes the law, thou, he's talking about Satan's offspring, will be ready to wound them in the heel, meaning he will obviously he will wound them in the heel, which means he will crush them. Alright, so let's take a look and understand who's the head and who's the heel, because this is really important to understand, because we know the head is Satan's offspring, right? Because he's referring to seed of thy son, okay, Satan's seed, and the seed of the woman, which would be the seed of Eve or Adam, okay, Adam and Eve's offspring, okay, so, but it refers to the woman. So let's find out who's the head and who is the heel. So if we go to, and I want to read something else. In order to understand who the head and the heel is, we also need to understand where the head and the heel is also being mentioned in other verses of Scripture. And this is, the head and the heel is also mentioned in the book of Esdras, the second book of Esdras, which, by the way, was removed by the Christians, okay? By, the false and wicked scribes in the world of Christianity. Now, why did they move the book of Esdras out of the Bible? You got to wonder about that. Well, there's a reason for it. And I think that if they removed it from the Catholic Church, the Catholic Bible, as well as the Protestant Bibles that you read today. Okay? They removed it from all the Christian Bibles. Well, let's find out. So if we go to the head and the heel is also mentioned in the book of Esdras. The second Esdras has a couple of books, but in second Esdras, the second book of Esdras, chapter 6 is also mentioned. I'm going to read it from the King James Bible, the 1611 version. So we go down to chapter 7, okay, it says, chapter 6, verse 7 is where I'm going to read it from. It says clearly here, and this is Esdras speaking to a messenger, an angel, that is, revealing to him what is to come, okay, future. He says prophecy, future prophecy. Then answered I and said, what shall be parting asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? This is what the angel is telling Esdras. And it says, which is known also, Esdras' name, that's his name in Greek, in the Christian Bible is known as Ezra. And it says, and he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. Okay? For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Okay, so that's really important. We're going to stop right there. I'm going to read that again. And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, born of Isaac, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. Okay, so when they came out of the womb, Jacob was holding, his hand was holding the heel of his brother Esau. And it says, now this is the meaning behind that, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob the beginning of the next world. Okay? Now, why is that important? It's very, very important. So let's find out. Now, why does that all tie into this? Well, I'm going to explain that, because why? It's talking about how when Jacob and Esau were born, Jacob held first the heel of Esau. Very important, the heel. Okay, so let's find out. Now, so back to this verse, it also refers to the heel in 3:15. Now, why is that relative? So let's break it down and find out what the heel really means. Okay, so in order to understand that, we need to understand both what the head and heel. So let's find out actually what the head means and then the heel. So it says, again, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise thy heel. So who's the head? Now, if we look up that word in the concordance, the head is concordance, Hebrew concordance number 7218, which means Rosh. So let's click on that to find out what the head means. So it's saying the actual Hebrew word for head is Rosh. Okay, masculine noun. Okay, and what does Rosh mean here? It's telling you it means head. It could mean chief, top, company, captain, principal, rulers. Do you see that? Rulers. Okay, so let's keep looking up what this word in Hebrew, Rosh, means head, but it also can be referred to as the head of man, animals. Also, this is what I want to focus on. It says also head, division, company. Okay, also chief, head of a city, of a nation. Okay, that's what we want to focus on. Alright, company or a nation. Alright. Now here's what's interesting. Its name is Rosh. Okay? So, this is where what they have done, this is where a lot of the coding. They're using our own language against us to hide a lot of the meaning of the text, of what the scriptures is really telling us, the truth. They used our own language and coded things so we couldn't figure it. There's a veil, essentially, and they coded things so we can't figure all this out. So in order to understand what the head is, you have to understand what Rosh really means. This is in Hebrew, okay, their construct language, which is really, it's not Hebrew, it's Aramaic, but we need to understand that they call Rosh is known as head. So who's Rosh? That's what we really need to understand behind the layers. You understand that they put in this veil they have placed over the writings of our people to codify all of this. So if you go and find out what Rosh really means, well, let's take a look at an ancient map. So if you look at an ancient map, Rosh is also used. It was used in the medieval world. Rosh was also known as a territory. Okay, so it was a country, and it was also named. It would be name of a country or a people, and this was also part of a territory of the descendants of Japhet. So if you look at Rosh on this map, and this is a map of Ezekiel's, the book of Ezekiel, when it speaks of the northern nations, it breaks down. Gomer was mentioned, Meshech, Tubal, Gog, and Magog. This is the prophecy in, I believe, chapter 37 of Ezekiel. And 38, it talks about the destruction of the nations in the north. Okay, and this is a breakdown of all those territories that they occupied in the north. Okay, which was part of Europe. And you can see Rosh is also, there's a city in Rosh known as Kiev. So what was Rosh? Okay, so back in the medieval times, it was known as Rosh. Now in the ancient world, it was Gomer, okay, or Gog or Magog, right? But it was also Rosh. Now, so what is Rosh in the modern world? Remember that city, Kiev, right here. So if you look at another map, let's look at a medieval map to find out what is Rosh in the world today. It's that part of, remember, it's between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and also in the Caucasus Mountains in Europe. Well, clearly we know that Rosh is part of also Moscow, and if it's part of Moscow, then Rosh was an ancient word for, not an ancient word, but it was a medieval term for what is known in the modern world today as Russia. Okay, because eventually first it was Ross. They also spelled it with the R-O-S, and then eventually R-O-R-U-S, Rus, and then eventually it became Russia. Okay, so Rosh, and it's also, if you can see, it's also part of this area of the Cimmerians. The Cimmerians, who are also known as the Cimmerians. We're going to get to that in a minute. So now we know that Rosh is a short form in the in the medieval world. It was a short form for Russia, right? So who was Russia back also known in the medieval world? What was that territory? Who occupied this territory in Russia? Well, let's look at another map. We look at a map in around the again, the Middle Age, a map that was constructed around the Middle Ages. We will find that same area, remember, I said it was between what? The Black Sea and the Caucasian Mountains, Caucasus Mountains, known as, now they're called, people that descend from those mountains, Caucasians. But it's also part of Europe. It's also known, that same area is known as, it was back in those days known as Khazaria in the Middle Ages. But on this map, and again, this map is from the peoples of, this map was the territories of the peoples of Europe about 900 AD. So this was a map around the Middle Ages, actually pre-Middle Ages, a little bit earlier than the Middle Ages, around 900 AD. Okay, and this was been right around the time when the Khazarians were converting becoming converts, because they remember they converted to Judaism, okay, which was it is a distorted or misrepresentation and a distortion of the original faith of our people, the Israelite faith of our people. But they did that around 740, and then they began to occupy Russia, or they were absorbed by Russia when Russia conquered them in right around 900 AD, somewhere around by the 10th century, which was around 900 AD, around this time frame. So notice, but they were still called Khazars, because this is just breaking down what these nations were called back then. So Khazars went between the Black Sea and also even the Caspian Sea. Okay, and if you look here, there's that city, Kiev. I don't know if you can see it this close, but there it is, Kiev, Kiev, right around where Khazaria is, and these Khazars. So yes, they were called Khazarias in the Middle Ages before they eventually converted, which was right around 740 AD they converted to Judaism and began to start later on, a few centuries later, they began invading our territories and taking over our lands and occupying our lands and basically masquerading and pretending to be us, the Israelites, Israelite nation, and occupied in order to take and steal our lands and occupy our territory. Okay, and they even funded the slave trade, but that's a conversation for another day. But that is ancient Russia, who today in the modern world is Russia. Okay, Khazaria. Okay, so we know who the Khazars are. Okay, so that helps us to understand who really Rosh is. Rosh is the people of Russia, because eventually, yes, Russia is part of their homeland. Okay, the Khazars, who are the people that are pretending to be us in Israel today. So let's go back to that verse. Jacob is the end of the world. Esau's the end of the world, and Jacob's the beginning that followeth. Now, why is all this important? So now, if we understand who the head is, which has been codified as Rosh, who is, we know, the serpent seed. Because remember, the Khazars were also known as the serpent people. So we know they're the descendants of Satan, okay, of Lucifer. They are the serpent seed. And that's the verse, and that's what they're hiding. That his descendants, okay, who they call the head, is known as the Khazars, who are occupying our lands today. Now we need to understand who the heel is. So who's the heel? Well, let's find out. Now, if you're not sure what I'm saying, okay, I also if you go into the two-letter lookup and type in head, and this is in the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon, the head also tells you that it's Rosh, okay, which is, we know now, is Khazars, the Khazars. Okay, they're occupying our land. Also, it gives you several different meanings. Remember, they like to change the letters around and take liberties with our language and the rules of our language. So that's why you'll see Rosh is spelled, which they say in Hebrew means head, is spelled with an O, is spelled with an E. Okay, they like to spell it, and they all has different meanings. The head, the sum, the head. But here's what I think is interesting about it. If you look at the meanings of it, they say front, height, beginning. Okay, now we know they ain't the beginning of the world. So why they use that term beginning? This is their delusion. They give a whole new meaning to the term delusion. Okay, so anything positive about them, they either hide or they try to put a positive spin on. So you understand, they change the narrative. They have even changed the meaning of the language of our people. Okay, because we know it doesn't mean beginning, it means head. This is what they call it, head, but they're saying beginning. All right. So, but here's another meaning of it too. It also means it means poison. Okay, it derives from a poisonous plant, which is known as a hemlock, and it's also venom. Helps you to understand they are the serpent people. Okay. Because remember, the serpent is another term that they have hidden in the scriptures for Satan. Okay, Lucifer. Alright, because remember, he was from the seraphim class of angels. Okay? So, but that's another seraph, okay, which is serpent. And it's interesting that they use that term, but that's what that means also. They have Rosh for venom, because they are the serpent people, okay, that they are the descendants of Lucifer, his children, his offspring, okay, from the corrupt gene pool, okay, when he corrupted humanity, descendants of Cain, essentially. So let's talk about the heel. So who is the heel? So the heel, I want to show you first, before I go into looking it up in a two-letter lookup. I want to go back here, and it tells us right here, when we look at what the lexicon in the Hebrew Aramaic, what it actually means. So it means a keb or a cob, a masculine noun. Now, of course, because they jacked up our language, this is what happens when you have people messing in your language that don't know your language or understand your language. They have even corrupted our language, and we never had a V. There is no V in our alphabet, okay? There's no V in the Aramaic alphabet, but sometimes they use the B, like Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv. There was really no Tel Aviv with a V, like Victor. This is what they call Israel. They changed it and added a V when it was a B, as in boy, okay? Tel Aviv, not Tel Aviv. But again, these people, corrupting our language with their Germanic language. So if you look at a keb or cob, that is what heel means. So a keb, they also spell it with an A, and I'm going to show you in a minute. But let's see what it means. It also means heel, liars in wait, heel, footprint, rear, hinder part, okay, rear, okay, which is very interesting. And then, as you can see, they have all their translation of it, okay. A liar in wait, okay, is what they say it means, okay. Now, let's find out exactly what a cob really, or a keb really means. First of all, again, they spell it with an A, and sometimes they spell it with an E. So if we go to the two-letter lookup and type in heel, let's find out what that really means in the Aramaic language. And who is the heel? So if we scroll down now, interesting, look how they changed, again, taking liberties with our language. We saw it was spelled with an E. Now a cob is spelled, which means heel, in Aramaic is spelled with an A here. It's Q-A-B as opposed to Q-E-B. And they also spell it with an E, E-Q-E-B. So you see how they've taken liberties and just kind of changed the wording around, the meanings and everything else. Again, just their corruption of our language. And again, here it is spelled how we saw it before, with an E. Okay? And then give it several meanings just to cause confusion. So, we can't figure this out when we, as the people that are learning the language. But here's the meaning of it, okay? They say it's a verb, and it says to seize by the heel, to circumvent, to restrain. Notice it says to seize by the heel, to circumvent, to restrain. And then also they say a heel, the last of anything, result, compensation on the account of. The last of anything. Now you notice how the head, they have another synonym for it saying beginning, but the heel is the last of anything, okay, rear. It's interesting how they put their own narrative and spin on things, corrupting the true meaning of what the words really mean. They know that's not what it means, right? But let's dig a little further, because what I really want to focus on, okay, and here it is again, a liar in wait, supplanter. Now there's someone else they call supplanter. So let's find out. So we keep scrolling. Let's find out what that really means. I want to show you something. I think it's in here too. Oh no, okay. So now what I want to focus on is this one, to seize by the heel, to circumvent, to restrain. So if we type in the word Jacob, when we type in that word, well, looky here. Jacob, proper name masculine. It's derived from the word in Aramaic, Aqab. A-Q-A-B. Isn't that the same word as heel? Meaning heel catcher. For example, supplanter. Okay, because they also call Jacob in the scriptures a supplanter. Okay? That in their mind's eye, that he took the land of his brother deceptively, which you and I know not necessarily, that is not what happened. Okay, but again, this is their narrative to the story. Okay, Jacob was always meant to have, the birthright of his brother, not land, the birthright. Jacob was always meant to have the birthright of that was Jacob's birthright. Okay, so, but interesting that the Edomites have a very different spin on Jacob, and even the meaning of his word, that the meaning of his name, they have tried to put a negative spin on by calling him a liar in wait and all of this. But it's interesting, they have heel catcher here, or supplanter. Heel holder. Jacob equals heel holder. Now remember, when both Jacob and Esau came out of his mother's womb, he was holding what? He was holding his brother's heel. That's why they call him the heel holder. That's what really Aqab means. It's referred to as Jacob, and even the way his name is spelled, Aqab. Again, they put an O on it where it's really an A. Again, taking liberties and changing the letters around. They're doing word plays, so you can't figure any of this out, brothers and sisters. But that's what it means. Even the way it's spelled in Hebrew is Aqab. It means heel. Okay? So, who is the heel? Obviously, Jacob. Now, if you need further understanding or proof of this, we go and look up this verse. Let's take a back step here and look up the verse again. It says, remember, to get clarity, it says, and after, this is in Genesis chapter 20 by verse 26, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. Remember, when he came out, okay, his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and therefore his name was called Jacob. To help you understand, why was his name Jacob? Because he was holding on to his brother's heel. His name, so heel is a code name for Jacob, but they just say Aqab. So you understand the word plays they play. They took off the Y and just say Aqab. So then they hid it in the text by saying heel rather than saying Jacob. Okay, so what is this helping you to understand? Okay, and when he says, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, in Genesis 3:15, between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head. He's talking about his offspring, who are the serpent seed, the people that are occupying the land today, known as the false, the Jews, okay, the Jewish, who are pretending to be us. That is the head, okay, Rosh for head. That is remember their name, okay, of their territory where they originated from, which was Russia, Central Asia, and they migrated to Russia, right? And thou shalt bruise, Khazaria, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Heel is who? Jacob. So, again, what it's telling you is Jacob has a prophecy to rule. Okay? The Most High has an inheritance for Jacob. In the next, not only in this world, the land that they're occupying is our inheritance, but even in the next world, Jacob is prophesied to rule. And this is what they've been hiding from our people. So why is this all important? Because if you look at the Targumim, and it says, if our people keep the commandments, this is why they have converted. In our history, they have forced our people into these false religions of Christianity and Islam and all these different various religions. So, and they're still in our lands today. They're going into the territories our people occupied in West Africa, okay, and teaching them the false religion of Judaism. That's a false misrepresentation. It's not the original faith of our people. But they're teaching these false religions. This is why they're forcing conversion, so that we will forget the law. They wanted us to forget the law and our identity of who we are and follow their way. Remember, one of the main instructions our Father gave us as part of the law was do not observe the way of the nations around us, because he knew that that would drive our people into utter, it would drive a wedge between us and our Father, the Most High. Because if we're not observing his laws, the instructions were very clear. If we're not observing his laws, then what's going to happen? It says it right there in 3:15 that would give them the ability to crush us and oppress us, to subjugate us. That's what they're talking about, crushing the heel, bruising the heel. But notice it says crushing the serpent head. Once we are obeying the laws and the commandments, we can crush the serpent, and the serpent is his descendants. Okay, the Edomites, Esau, which is not just the people occupying Israel, but really the nations in general that are oppressing us, because they're all part of it. I mean, if you look at the map, look at the map. These are the descendants: Magog, Gog, and Magog. Okay, the Gomerites. Okay, now you see that Rosh and Gomer. Why this is so important? Because they're also known as Gomerites. Let me explain something. If you really think that it's funny, they put one of their synonyms is that they have in the word head means beginning. But let me show you something to help you understand all of this and tie it all together. They know who they are, and they know their history stands against them. Well, how do we know this? If you type in the word end in the Hebrew lexicon, Aramaic lexicon, let's find out. You type in that word, well, look, what do we get? Ashkenaz, End, Ashkenaz, a descendant of Japhet. They're also known as Ashkenazi Jews, okay? A man is sprinkled, fire is scattered, a descendant of Japhet. Northern people, okay, perhaps Bithynia. They ain't from no Bithynia. They're from Rosh, okay? Europe, the north. Okay, now let's keep going and find out what that word is. Funny, N brings them up here, and then let's just see here. They think they're the beginning, huh? Also, and also brings up the term Belial in here too. Okay, to make away with, destroy. Bala, Baal, okay, which comes from the root Belial, okay, to mix, to fodder, all of this, okay. These are all taken from the word Belial, okay. Okay, so, but that's not what I want to show you, but let me just show you something here. If you keep scrolling, okay, to end is gamar, comes from the Aramaic term gamar, means to complete or to end. And what other word is derived from gamar? Okay, this is a verb, end, to end. Oh, looky here, gomar, which derives from Strong's Concordance 1586 from the Aramaic word gamar, which means not completion, but to end. So you still, if they still think they're the beginning, they already know they're not the beginning. Because who's Gomar? The eldest son of Japhet and grandson of Noah, the progenitor of the early Cimmerians and other branches of the Celtic family. So they're talking about what? They're talking about Gomerites, same thing. Gog and Magog, also known as Ashkenaz, as well as Esau in general. All the Edomites, Romans, Greeks, you name it, Cimmerians. These people are the descendants of Japhet. Okay? And they know that they are the end of the world. As it says, Esau, remember, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning that followeth. thanks for tuning in. Please share this video with other brothers, Israelite brothers and sisters. Please help them to wake up to understand what has been hidden in the truth. And I'm going to continue with this series next week. Thank you. Well, we're going to talk about something else, but it's going to be part of this series. But please, brothers and sisters, this is making my point, to come into the law, get out of these churches, false Christianity, the false religion known as Christianity, and these, which is just places of Baal worship of the nations around us, okay, that are, as you can see, has been prophesied. You know what's going to happen, okay? And this is the scriptures is telling you. Please come into the instructions and the law of the Most High from the original Testament, not the New Testament, and the lies and the narrative, false narrative of Christianity. And please share my video. Thank you so much, and may the Most High bless.